Sarah Martinez had always been an ordinary woman, living an ordinary life in the small town of Riverside, California. At 32, she worked as a librarian at the local public library, spending her days helping children find picture books and assisting elderly patrons with computer tutorials. Her routine was predictable and comfortable. Wake up at 6:30, coffee and toast, drive to work in her reliable Honda Civic, 8 hours among books and quiet whispers, then home to her small apartment where she would cook dinner for one and watch Netflix until bedtime. But Sarah carried a secret that set her apart from the quiet image she presented to the world. Hidden beneath her conservative cardigans and long sleeves was an intricate tattoo that told a story of courage, loss, and honor. The tattoo covered most of her left arm, starting from her shoulder and flowing down to her wrist. It depicted a military scene with remarkable detail: soldiers in combat gear, helicopters overhead, and in the center, the face of her younger brother Michael, who had died serving his country in Afghanistan 3 years earlier. Michael had been her hero, her protector, and her best friend. When they were children, he would chase away the neighborhood bullies and help her with her homework. When he enlisted in the Army at 18, Sarah was heartbroken but proud. She wrote him letters every week during his deployment, sending care, packages filled with his favorite cookies and books. When the news came that Michael had been killed by an improvised explosive device while on patrol, Sarah's world shattered. The tattoo had been her way of keeping Michael's memory alive, of carrying him with her always. She had spent months working with a talented artist named Diego, who specialized in military memorial tattoos. Together, they created something beautiful and meaningful. The tattoo included Michael's unit insignia, his dog tags, and a quote he used to say, "Courage is not the absence of fear, but action in spite of it." The artwork was so detailed that you could see the individual tears on the faces of the soldiers mourning their fallen comrade. For 3 years, Sarah kept the tattoo hidden from most people. Her co-workers at the library had no idea it existed. Her elderly neighbors saw her as the sweet, quiet librarian who helped them carry groceries. Even her few close friends had only glimpsed parts of it. Sarah wasn't ashamed of the tattoo, but she knew it raised questions she wasn't always ready to answer. Explaining Michael's death never got easier. The decision to visit the shooting range had been spontaneous. Sarah was feeling restless on a Saturday morning, tired of her usual routine of cleaning and grocery shopping. She had been thinking about Michael more than usual lately, approaching the 3rd anniversary of his death. She remembered how he used to talk about target practice, how it helped him focus and clear his mind. Michael had tried to teach her to shoot during one of his leaves, but she had been too nervous and distracted to learn properly. Something inside her that morning whispered that it was time to try again. Maybe connecting with this part of Michael's life would help her feel closer to him. She Googled shooting ranges in the area and found Precision Arms, a well-reviewed facility about 20 minutes from her apartment. She called to ask about beginner classes and learned they offered individual instruction sessions for new shooters. The range was busier than Sarah had expected when she arrived that afternoon. The parking lot was filled with pickup trucks and SUVs, and she could hear the distant sound of gunfire from the indoor ranges. She sat in her car for a few minutes, suddenly wondering if this was a mistake. She was wearing a simple t-shirt and jeans, having decided that morning to stop hiding her tattoo, at least for one day. The afternoon was warm, and she was tired of always covering up. Taking a deep breath, Sarah walked into the front office. The receptionist, a friendly woman in her 50s named Betty, welcomed her warmly and explained the safety procedures. Betty assigned her to Lane 7 and introduced her to Jake, a patient instructor in his 40s who specialized in working with nervous beginners. Jake spent 30 minutes going over basic safety rules, showing Sarah how to hold the pistol properly and explaining how to aim and breathe correctly. When they moved to the range itself, Sarah felt overwhelmed by the noise and activity. Other shooters were practicing in nearby lanes, and the sound of gunfire was louder than she had expected, even with ear protection. Her hands were shaking as Jake handed her the pistol, and her first few shots went wide of the target completely. "Don't worry," Jake said encouragingly. "Everyone starts somewhere. Take your time and remember what we practiced about breathing." Sarah tried to focus on Jake's instructions, thinking about what Michael might have said if he were there with her. She imagined his patient voice telling her to relax, to trust herself. Gradually, her shots began to improve. She wasn't hitting the bullseye, but she was at least hitting the target consistently. After an hour of practice, Sarah was feeling more confident. Her shots were getting closer to the center of the target, and she was starting to understand the appeal that shooting had held for Michael. There was something meditative about the focus required, the way everything else faded away except for the target and her breathing. It was during one of her practice sessions that Sarah noticed a man watching her from a few lanes away. He was tall and muscular, probably in his late 30s, with the kind of posture and alertness that suggested military background. He had been shooting with remarkable precision, his targets showing tight groupings that spoke of extensive training, but now he had stopped shooting and was staring at Sarah with an expression of intense concentration. Sarah felt self-conscious under his gaze and tried to ignore him, focusing on her own target. But she could feel his eyes on her, and it was making her nervous. Her shots began to go wide again, and she started to regret her decision to wear a t-shirt that revealed her tattoo. She wondered if the man was judging her, thinking she was some kind of wannabe trying to play soldier. When Sarah finished her session and began packing up her things, the man approached her lane. He was even more intimidating up close, with piercing, blue eyes and scars on his hands that spoke of hard experience. But his expression was serious rather than threatening, and when he spoke, his voice was respectful. "Excuse me," he said quietly. "I couldn't help but notice your tattoo. That's some incredible artwork." Sarah's heart began racing as the stranger studied her tattoo with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. She instinctively pulled her arm closer to her body, suddenly regretting her decision to wear short sleeves. Most people who noticed her tattoo offered polite compliments or asked basic questions, but this man was examining it like he was reading a military report. "Thank you," she said quietly, hoping to end the conversation quickly. She began gathering her gear more rapidly, eager to leave, but the man didn't take the hint. Instead, he stepped closer, his eyes fixed on specific details in the artwork. "That unit insignia," he said, pointing to a small emblem on the depicted soldier's uniform. 101st Airborne Division, the Screaming Eagles. Sarah froze. Most civilians wouldn't recognize such specific military details, but this man had identified Michael's unit immediately. Her throat tightened as she realized this wasn't going to be a casual conversation about tattoo artistry. "The detail work is extraordinary," the man continued, his voice becoming softer. "The artist captured the gear configuration perfectly. Those are authentic military equipment details. Most civilian artists get things wrong, but whoever did this work knew exactly what they were doing." Sarah found herself nodding despite her discomfort. Diego, her tattoo artist, had spent hours researching military equipment and uniforms to ensure accuracy. He had even contacted veterans organizations to verify details, wanting to honor Michael's memory properly. The man's eyes moved to the face in the center of the tattoo, and his expression changed completely. The analytical military bearing gave way to something deeper and more human. "This is a memorial piece, isn't it?" he asked gently. "Someone important to you?" For a moment, Sarah couldn't speak. The anniversary of Michael's death was approaching, and her emotions were already raw. Having a stranger examine the most personal artwork on her body felt invasive and overwhelming. But there was something in the man's tone, an understanding that spoke of personal experience with loss. "My brother," she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. The man nodded solemnly. "Combat loss?" Sarah nodded, not trusting herself to speak without breaking down. The shooting range suddenly felt too loud, too crowded, too public for this conversation. "I'm sorry for your loss," the man said with genuine sincerity. "And I apologize for intruding. I've never seen a memorial tattoo done with such attention to authentic detail. Most artists don't understand military culture well enough to get everything right." Something in his tone made Sarah look at him more carefully. His stance, his haircut, his way of speaking, the scars on his hands, everything suggested active or recent military service. "Are you military?" she asked. "Navy SEAL," he replied simply. "Commander James Sullivan. I've been stationed at Coronado for the past 8 years." Sarah's eyes widened. Even as a civilian, she knew enough about the military to understand that Navy SEALs were elite special forces operators. The idea that someone with his level of training and experience had been studying her tattoo so intently was both flattering and intimidating. "Your brother served with honor," Commander Sullivan said, gesturing toward the tattoo. "The 101st Airborne has a proud history. Some of the finest soldiers I've ever worked alongside came from that unit." Sarah felt tears building in her eyes. In 3 years, no one had spoken about Michael's service with such respect and understanding. Most people offered generic condolences about supporting our troops, but Commander Sullivan spoke with the authority of someone who truly understood what Michael's service had meant. "He died in Afghanistan," Sarah said, surprised at her own willingness to share details with this stranger. "IED attack during a patrol. He was trying to protect his squad." Commander Sullivan's jaw tightened. "How long ago?" 3 years next month. He was only 24. The commander was quiet for a long moment, and Sarah could see him processing the information. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of someone who had lost fellow warriors. "The way you've honored his memory is remarkable," he said. "This tattoo, it tells his story properly. Most memorial tattoos I see are generic designs with dates and names. But this captures something real about military service, about brotherhood, about sacrifice." Sarah found herself studying Commander Sullivan's face as he spoke. There was pain there, old and well-controlled, but unmistakable. She realized that he understood her loss in a way that most people never could. "Have you lost people?" she asked quietly. The commander nodded. "Too many. It's part of the job, but it never gets easier. We learn to carry their memory, to honor their sacrifice by continuing the mission. But civilian families, you carry the loss differently. You don't have the framework of military culture to help process the grief." Sarah was struck by his understanding. For 3 years, she had struggled with feeling disconnected from Michael's military world. She attended veterans events and memorial services, but always felt like an outsider looking in. Her grief was real, but it was different from the grief of his battle buddies who had shared his experiences. "I've been feeling lost," she admitted. "Like I can't properly honor his memory because I don't understand the world he lived in." Commander Sullivan considered this carefully. "Your brother chose to serve, but you served too in your own way. Military families sacrifice just as much as the service members themselves. You worried about him every day, supported him from home, and now you carry his memory. That matters." Jake, Sarah's shooting instructor, approached to check on her progress and collect the rental equipment. When he saw her talking with Commander Sullivan, his demeanor immediately became more respectful. "Commander," Jake said with a slight nod, "I didn't know you were here today. How's the new batch of trainees coming along?" "They're improving," Commander Sullivan replied. "Jake here runs an excellent program," he told Sarah. "Some of my team members train here during their off hours." Sarah realized that Commander Sullivan was apparently well known at the range, which explained Jake's respectful attitude. She began to understand that she had encountered someone significant in the local military community. As Jake collected the equipment and moved away, Commander Sullivan turned back to Sarah. "Would you mind if I asked who did your tattoo work? The quality is exceptional, and I have team members who are interested in memorial pieces." "Diego Morales at Ink and Honor downtown," Sarah replied. "He specializes in military tattoos. He spent months researching everything to make sure it was accurate." Commander Sullivan nodded approvingly. "I'll have to check out his work. Quality matters when you're memorializing fallen heroes." Sarah felt a warmth spreading through her chest at his words. For the first time since Michael's death, someone truly understood the importance of what she had done, the care and thought that had gone into honoring her brother's memory properly. As Sarah prepared to leave the shooting range, Commander Sullivan made an unexpected request that would change the trajectory of her weekend, and perhaps much more. "I know this might sound forward," he said, his confident military bearing giving way to something more uncertain. But would you be willing to meet me for coffee sometime? I'd like to hear more about your brother's story. Sarah was taken aback by the invitation. In her 3 years of grief, she had become accustomed to people avoiding the topic of Michael's death, changing the subject when she mentioned her loss, or offering quick condolences before moving on to lighter topics. The idea that someone wanted to actively listen to Michael's story was both appealing and terrifying. Why? She asked, genuinely curious about his motivation. Commander Sullivan seemed to consider his words carefully. In my line of work, we talk a lot about brotherhood, about never leaving a fallen comrade behind. But we don't often hear from the families, from the people who loved these heroes before they became soldiers. Your perspective matters, and honestly, I think hearing Michael's story might help me understand something I've been struggling with myself. There was a vulnerability in his admission that surprised Sarah. This was clearly a man accustomed to command, to certainty, to having answers. His willingness to acknowledge his own struggles made him seem more human, less intimidating. I'm not sure I'd be very good company, Sarah warned. Talking about Michael still makes me emotional. Emotions aren't weakness, Commander Sullivan replied. They're proof that love survives loss. Some of the strongest people I know are military families who've faced what you've faced. Sarah found herself agreeing to meet him the next afternoon, at a quiet coffee shop downtown. As she drove home, she wondered what she had gotten herself into. She barely knew anything about this man beyond his military rank and his apparent understanding of her tattoo. But something about his respectful attention to Michael's story had awakened a hunger she hadn't realized she was feeling. The hunger to share her brother's memory with someone who would truly understand its significance. The next day, Sarah arrived at the coffee shop 15 minutes early, her stomach churning with nervousness. She had changed clothes 3 times that morning, unsure of how to dress for what wasn't quite a date, but wasn't exactly a casual meeting either. She had settled on jeans and a light sweater that covered most of her tattoo, while still leaving her wrist visible. Commander Sullivan arrived precisely on time, wearing civilian clothes that somehow still managed to look military in their neat precision. He had brought a small leather folder with him, which he set on the table as he sat down across from her. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me," he said as they ordered their drinks. "I realize yesterday was probably overwhelming." Sarah appreciated his acknowledgement of her discomfort. "It was unexpected," she admitted. "Most people don't want to hear war stories, especially sad ones." "That's their loss," Commander Sullivan said firmly. "These stories matter. They need to be told and remembered." As they settled into conversation, Sarah found herself sharing details about Michael that she hadn't talked about in years. She told Commander Sullivan about Michael's childhood dreams of becoming a soldier, how he used to build elaborate fort structures in their backyard and stage mock battles with neighborhood kids. She described his excitement when he enlisted, his pride in earning his airborne wings, his letters home that were always upbeat despite the dangerous conditions he faced. Commander Sullivan listened with complete attention, asking thoughtful questions that showed he understood the military context of Michael's experiences. When Sarah mentioned Michael's unit's mission in Afghanistan, the commander was familiar with the region and the strategic challenges they would have faced. When she talked about Michael's final letter home, in which he had written about the importance of protecting his fellow soldiers, Commander Sullivan nodded with the understanding of someone who had felt that same responsibility. "He sounds like the kind of soldier every commander hopes to have," Commander Sullivan said. "Brave, dedicated, and focused on his team above himself." Sarah felt tears building in her eyes again, but this time they weren't entirely from sadness. There was relief, mixed with the pain. Relief at finally being able to share Michael's story with someone who appreciated its full meaning. "Can I show you something?" Commander Sullivan asked, opening the leather folder he had brought. Inside were several photographs and documents. "These are pictures from my last deployment. I lost 2 team members during that operation." He showed Sarah photographs of his SEAL team, pointing out the 2 men who had died. Like Michael, they were young and eager, with bright smiles that spoke of optimism and dedication. Commander Sullivan talked about their personalities, their skills, their dreams for after their military service. "This is Marcus," he said, pointing to a tall, lanky young man with an infectious grin. He was planning to become a teacher when he got out. He used to tutor local kids whenever we had downtime. He pointed to another photo. And this is David. He was going to marry his high school sweetheart and open a motorcycle repair shop with his father. Sarah realized that Commander Sullivan was sharing his own grief with her, offering his own stories of loss as a way of honoring her willingness to share Michael's story. It was a generous exchange, and she appreciated the trust he was showing her. "How do you carry it?" she asked. "The weight of losing people you were responsible for?" Commander Sullivan was quiet for a long moment. "I used to think the answer was to compartmentalize, to focus on the mission and push the grief aside. But that doesn't work long term. The grief finds ways to surface. I've learned that the healthier approach is to honor their memory by living in a way that would make them proud." "Is that why you wanted to hear about Michael?" Sarah asked. "To understand how families process this kind of loss?" "Partly," he admitted, "but also because I've been thinking about transitioning out of active duty soon, and I'm struggling with what that means for how I carry my fallen teammates' memory. Seeing your tattoo, understanding the thought and care you put into honoring Michael, it gave me hope that there are meaningful ways to remember them even when the military structure isn't there to provide context." Sarah was surprised by his openness about considering leaving military service. "How long have you been a SEAL?" 15 years. I enlisted right out of college. It's been my entire adult identity. But I'm 38 now, and the physical demands are getting harder. More importantly, I'm starting to think about what kind of legacy I want to leave beyond military operations." As their conversation continued, Sarah found herself seeing Commander Sullivan not just as an impressive military officer, but as a person grappling with questions of purpose and meaning that she understood deeply. Both of them were carrying the weight of honoring fallen heroes while trying to figure out how to move forward with their own lives. The afternoon stretched into evening as they talked, sharing stories and perspectives that neither had been able to discuss with others who lacked their specific experiences with military loss. When Sarah finally looked at her watch, she was shocked to discover they had been talking for over 4 hours. "I should probably head home," she said reluctantly. "But this has been helpful. Thank you for listening." "Thank you for sharing Michael's story," Commander Sullivan replied. "Would you be willing to do this again sometime? I feel like I'm learning something important about honoring the fallen in civilian life." Sarah agreed, and as they exchanged phone numbers, she realized that something significant had shifted in her understanding of her own grief and her brother's legacy. Over the next several weeks, Sarah and Commander Sullivan began meeting regularly. What had started as a single coffee conversation about memorial tattoos evolved into a deeper friendship built on their shared understanding of military loss and sacrifice. They met twice a week, sometimes for coffee, sometimes for walks along the beach near the naval base, and occasionally for dinner at quiet restaurants where they could talk without interruption. During these meetings, Sarah learned more about James Sullivan the person, not just the military commander. He had grown up in a small farming town in Ohio, the son of a factory worker and a school nurse. His decision to join the Navy had been motivated partly by a desire to serve his country, and partly by a need to escape the limited opportunities of his hometown. The military had given him purpose, structure, and a clear identity, but it had also cost him relationships and normal life experiences that most people took for granted. "I've never been married," he admitted during one of their beach walks. "I've had relationships, but the demands of SEAL operations made it impossible to maintain anything serious. You can't build a life with someone when you're deployed 8 months out of the year and can't tell them where you're going or when you'll be back." Sarah found herself sharing equally personal details about her own life. She told James about her struggles with dating after Michael's death, how potential partners either couldn't understand her grief or became uncomfortable with the intensity of her brother's presence in her life through the memorial tattoo and her dedication to honoring his memory. "Most men see the tattoo and either assume I'm trying to be tough and rebellious, or they get weird about dating someone whose body is a memorial to another man, even if that man was my brother," she explained. "It's like they can't separate my love for Michael from romantic love, which is ridiculous but surprisingly common." James listened to her frustrations with understanding. Military spouses deal with similar challenges. The civilian world doesn't always understand the intensity of military bonds, whether it's between service members or between families and their deployed loved ones. Their conversations began to extend beyond discussions of loss and memory. Sarah shared her passion for literature and her dreams of maybe writing someday about military families' experiences. James talked about his interest in leadership development and his growing desire to mentor younger service members who were struggling with the psychological demands of special operations. One evening, as they sat on a bench overlooking the harbor, James made a suggestion that would deepen their connection significantly. "There's something I'd like to ask you," he said, his tone more serious than usual. "Next weekend is the anniversary of the operation where I lost Marcus and David. My team traditionally holds a memorial service and family members are invited to attend. Would you consider coming with me?" Sarah was surprised by the invitation. "Are you sure that's appropriate? I didn't know them." "That's exactly why I want you there," James explained. "You understand memorial and loss from a family perspective. My team is good at military honors and formal ceremonies, but sometimes I think we miss the human element that families bring to remembering the fallen. Your presence might help us honor them more completely." Sarah agreed, though she felt nervous about attending such a personal military event. She spent considerable time choosing what to wear, settling on a respectful black dress and deciding to wear a cardigan that would cover most of her tattoo, unsure of how the other service members might react to such a visible memorial. The memorial service was held at a private location on the naval base in a quiet garden area, reserved for such ceremonies. Sarah was struck by the presence of the SEAL team members who attended. These were clearly elite warriors, men who had faced combat and danger that most people couldn't imagine, yet their grief for their fallen teammates was raw and visible. James introduced Sarah to the team as a friend who understands military loss. The SEALs were respectful and welcoming, though she could sense their curiosity about why their commander had brought a civilian to such an intimate ceremony. The service itself was simple, but deeply moving. Team members shared stories about Marcus and David, highlighting not just their military accomplishments but their personalities, their humor, their dreams for the future. Sarah was particularly touched by the stories about Marcus's dedication to teaching local children during deployments and David's plans for his post-military life. When the formal ceremony ended, several team members approached Sarah to thank her for attending. One young SEAL named Tommy pulled her aside with a question that caught her completely off guard. "Ma'am, I hope you don't mind me asking, but is that a military memorial tattoo on your arm?" "I caught a glimpse of it earlier, and it looked incredibly detailed." Sarah glanced at James, who nodded encouragingly. She rolled up her cardigan sleeve to show Tommy her tattoo. His reaction was immediate and intense. "Holy shit, sorry ma'am. That's the most incredible memorial piece I've ever seen. The detail work is amazing. Who was he?" As Sarah explained about Michael and showed Tommy the various elements of the tattoo design, other team members gathered around. They examined the artwork with the same attention to military detail that James had shown at the shooting range, commenting on the accuracy of the equipment depicted and the skill of the artist. "This is how you honor fallen brothers," said a senior petty officer named Rodriguez. "Most memorial tattoos look like generic military clip art. This tells a real story." The team members' appreciation for her tattoo was overwhelming. Several of them asked for information about Diego, her tattoo artist, expressing interest in commissioning memorial pieces for teammates they had lost over the years. Sarah found herself exchanged contact information and promising to connect them with Diego. But the most significant moment came when the team's senior chief, a grizzled veteran named Patterson with over 20 years of service, approached Sarah privately. "Ma'am, I want to thank you for being here today," he said quietly. "The commander has been different these past few weeks, more relaxed, more open. I think talking with you about loss and memory has been helping him process some things he's been carrying for a long time." Sarah was surprised by the senior chief's observation. "Different how?" "More human," Patterson replied. "Don't get me wrong, he's always been a great leader, but he's been carrying a lot of weight from all the operations we've done, all the people we've lost. He's been too focused on being strong for everyone else. Talking with you seems to have given him permission to acknowledge his own grief. As Sarah rode home with James after the memorial service, she reflected on Patterson's words. She had been so focused on how their conversations were helping her process Michael's death that she hadn't fully recognized how much James needed to talk about his own losses. "Thank you for including me today," she said. "Your team is remarkable." "Thank you for being there," James replied. "Having you present changed the whole dynamic of the ceremony. You brought a perspective that we needed, the understanding of how families remember and honor the fallen." As they sat in James's truck outside Sarah's apartment, both of them seemed reluctant to end the evening. The memorial service had created a new level of intimacy between them, a shared experience that went beyond their previous conversations. "Sarah," James said quietly, "I want you to know that these past few weeks have been important to me. Not just the conversations about loss and memory, but getting to know you as a person. You're helping me understand things about myself that I've been avoiding for years." Sarah felt her heart racing as she recognized the shift in their relationship. What had begun as two people sharing their experiences with military loss was evolving into something deeper and more personal. The weeks following the memorial service brought unexpected complications to Sarah and James's growing relationship. What had started as friendship built on shared understanding of military loss was transforming into something deeper, but neither of them was quite ready to acknowledge the romantic feelings that were developing. Sarah found herself looking forward to their meetings with an anticipation that went beyond friendship. She began paying more attention to her appearance when she knew she would see James, choosing outfits that were flattering while still respecting the serious nature of their conversations. She caught herself thinking about him during quiet moments at the library, wondering what he was doing during his training exercises and whether he was thinking about her too. James was experiencing similar feelings but was struggling with them more intensely. His military training had taught him to compartmentalize emotions and maintain professional boundaries, but Sarah was awakening feelings he hadn't allowed himself to experience in years. The vulnerability she had shown in sharing Michael's story, combined with her genuine interest in understanding military culture, had created an emotional intimacy that James found both thrilling and terrifying. Their relationship faced its first real test when James received orders for a 2-week training exercise that would take him away without communication access. The night before his departure, they met for dinner at a quiet restaurant overlooking the harbor. Both of them seemed to sense that something significant was about to change in their relationship. "I hate the idea of being out of contact with you for 2 weeks," James admitted as they shared dessert. "I've gotten used to our conversations and I'm going to miss them more than I expected." Sarah felt her heart skip at his words. "I'll miss talking with you too. These past few weeks have become really important to me." "Sarah," James said, reaching across the table to touch her hand gently, "I need to be honest with you about something. What I'm feeling for you goes beyond friendship. I care about you in ways that I haven't cared about anyone in years." The confession hung in the air between them, charged with possibility and uncertainty. Sarah looked down at their joined hands, processing the shift from friendship to something more romantic. "I care about you too," she admitted quietly. "But I'm scared, James. I'm scared of caring about someone whose job puts him in danger. I lost Michael to military service, and the idea of opening my heart to someone who faces similar risks terrifies me." James squeezed her hand gently. "I understand your fear. It's completely rational given what you've been through, but I want you to know that I'm not Michael. I'm an experienced operator with 15 years of training. I'm careful, I'm smart about risks, and I have every intention of coming home from every mission." "But you can't guarantee that," Sarah said, her voice breaking slightly. "Michael was careful too. He was smart and well-trained, and he still didn't come home." The weight of her words settled over them both. James had been in combat situations where good soldiers died, despite their training and caution. He couldn't honestly promise Sarah that he would never be in danger, because danger was inherent in his profession. You're right, he said finally. I can't guarantee my safety any more than you can guarantee yours when you drive to work every day, but I can promise you that if we decide to explore this relationship, I'll be as careful as possible and I'll always fight to come back to you. Sarah felt tears building in her eyes. The rational part of her brain was screaming warnings about getting involved with another military man, but her heart was already invested in James in ways she hadn't expected. What happens when you deploy again? She asked. What happens when you're gone for months at a time and I'm here worrying about whether you're alive or dead? Military spouses deal with those challenges all the time, James replied. It's not easy, but it's manageable when both people are committed to making it work. The question is whether what we have is worth fighting for, despite the difficulties. Sarah looked across the table at this man who had entered her life so unexpectedly and changed everything. James had shown her kindness, understanding, and respect that she had never experienced in a romantic relationship. He had honored Michael's memory and helped her process her grief in ways that had been healing and transformative. I think it might be worth fighting for, she said slowly. But I need you to understand that I come with baggage. Michael will always be part of my life through the tattoo, through anniversary observances, through my commitment to supporting military families. If we do this, you're not just dating me. You're accepting my ongoing relationship with grief and memory. Your love for Michael is part of what makes you who you are, James replied. I wouldn't want you to change that. In fact, your dedication to honoring his memory is one of the things I admire most about you. During James's 2-week training exercise, Sarah experienced a preview of what military relationship anxiety felt like. She found herself checking the news obsessively, looking for any reports of military training accidents. She jumped every time her phone rang, irrationally fearing that it might be official notification of something terrible happening to James. The experience gave her new empathy for military spouses and families who lived with constant low-level worry about their deployed loved ones. It also helped her understand that her fears about military relationships weren't just about James specifically. They were about her own capacity to handle that kind of ongoing stress. When James returned from his training exercise, tanned and tired but safe, Sarah realized how much she had missed him and how invested she had become in his well-being. The relief she felt when she saw him again was overwhelming and clarifying. They met for coffee the afternoon after his return, both of them eager to reconnect after the separation. James looked more relaxed than Sarah had ever seen him, and she realized that having someone to come back to had changed something in his approach to military service. How was it being away from communication? Sarah asked. Did you think about our conversation? Every day, James admitted. Being cut off from contact with you made me realize how much you've become part of my life. I found myself wanting to share experiences with you, wanting to hear your voice, missing our conversations about everything and nothing. Sarah felt her heart warming at his words. I missed you too, more than I expected to, and I spent a lot of time thinking about what it would mean to be in a relationship with someone in your profession. And what did you conclude? That I'm willing to try, Sarah said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. I'm scared, and I know it won't be easy, but what we have feels too important to let fear make the decision for us. James reached across the table and took her hands in both of his. Are you sure? Once we cross this line from friendship to romance, there's no going back to the way things were before. I'm sure, Sarah replied. Michael used to tell me that the biggest risk in life isn't physical danger. It's the risk of never really living, never really connecting with people, never opening your heart to love. I think he would want me to take this chance. That evening, as they walked along the beach where they had shared so many conversations as friends, James stopped and turned to face Sarah. The sunset was painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, and the sound of waves provided a peaceful backdrop for the moment that would change both of their lives. Sarah Martinez, James said softly, would you like to be my girlfriend? The formal, almost old-fashioned way he asked the question made Sarah laugh, despite the emotional intensity of the moment. Commander James Sullivan, she replied with a smile, I would be honored to be your girlfriend. As they kissed for the First time, with the Pacific Ocean stretching out before them and the memory of Michael's blessing in Sarah's heart, both of them knew that they were beginning something significant and transformative. The ordinary woman from the shooting range and the Navy SEAL commander had found in each other not just romantic love, but a partnership built on mutual respect, shared values, and the understanding that the best way to honor the fallen is to live fully and love deeply. The morning of Michael's death anniversary arrived gray and drizzling, as if the weather itself understood the solemnity of the day. Sarah had planned to spend it alone, as she had for the previous 2 years, visiting Michael's grave and then retreating to her apartment to look through photo albums and letters. But James had gently asked if he could accompany her, and after much internal debate, Sarah had agreed. They drove to the cemetery in comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts about loss, memory, and the unexpected path that had brought them together. Sarah carried a bouquet of sunflowers, Michael's favorite flowers because he said they always looked optimistic even on cloudy days. James had brought a small American flag, a gesture that touched Sarah deeply. Michael's grave was in the veterans section of the cemetery, surrounded by other young service members who had died far from home. Sarah had visited this place dozens of times, but having James beside her changed the experience completely. Instead of feeling isolated in her grief, she felt connected to a larger community of people who understood the cost of military service. Specialist, Michael Martinez, James read from the headstone, his voice respectful. 101st Airborne Division, Purple Heart, Bronze Star. He looked at Sarah with new understanding. He was decorated for valor. Sarah nodded, her throat tight with emotion. He saved 3 members of his squad when their vehicle hit the IED. He didn't make it, but they did because of his actions. James placed the small flag beside Michael's headstone and stood at attention for a moment, offering a military salute that acknowledged Michael as a fallen comrade. The gesture was simple but profound, and Sarah felt tears streaming down her face as she watched this accomplished Navy SEAL honor her brother's sacrifice. After they left the cemetery, James suggested they visit the beach where they had taken many of their walks over the past few weeks. The weather was clearing, and the afternoon sun was beginning to break through the clouds. As they walked along the shore, Sarah found herself talking about Michael in a different way than she ever had before. "I think I've been afraid to move forward with my life because I was worried it would mean forgetting him," she admitted. "But spending time with you has helped me understand that carrying his memory doesn't have to mean staying frozen in grief." James stopped walking and turned to face her. "Your brother's legacy isn't your sadness, Sarah. It's your strength, your capacity for love, your dedication to honoring service and sacrifice. Moving forward with your life doesn't diminish any of that." As they stood facing each other on the beach with the sun setting behind them, Sarah felt a shift in her understanding of her own life and future. For 3 years, she had defined herself, primarily as Michael's grieving sister, the woman who carried his memory in ink on her skin and sorrow in her heart. But James had helped her see that she could be both a loving sister, honoring her brother's memory, and a woman open to new experiences and relationships. "I want to try," she said quietly. "I want to try moving forward, being open to whatever this is between us, but I need you to understand that Michael will always be part of my life. The tattoo, the anniversary visits, the commitment to honoring military families, that's not going to change." "I wouldn't want it to change," James replied. "Your love for Michael is part of what makes you who you are. I respect that, and I want to support it." 6 months later, Sarah and James's relationship had deepened into something neither of them had expected when they first met at the shooting range. James had begun the process of transitioning out of active SEAL duty, accepting a position training younger special operations candidates. The decision had been influenced partly by his growing relationship with Sarah, and partly by his own recognition that he was ready for a different kind of service to his country. Sarah had started volunteering with a nonprofit organization that supported military families dealing with loss and trauma. Her experience with grief, combined with her newfound understanding of military culture through her relationship with James, made her uniquely qualified to help other families navigate their own difficult journeys. The tattoo that had once been Primarily a source of private pain had become something else entirely. A conversation starter that helped Sarah connect with other military families, a symbol of resilience that inspired people dealing with their own losses, and a beautiful piece of art that told a story of love surviving death. On a sunny Saturday morning, almost exactly 1 year after their first meeting at the shooting range, Sarah and James returned to Precision Arms together. This time, Sarah's shooting had improved dramatically under James's patient instruction, and she was consistently hitting the center of the target. But they weren't there just for target practice. James had arranged for several of his SEAL team members to meet Diego, Sarah's tattoo artist, who had come to the range to discuss memorial tattoo designs with the operators who had been impressed by Sarah's artwork. As Sarah watched James working, with his teammates and Diego, helping them think through meaningful ways to honor their fallen comrades, she realized how much her life had changed in just 1 year. The ordinary woman who had walked into the shooting range carrying hidden grief had become someone actively engaged in helping others heal from military loss. Her relationship with James had taught her that love didn't have to be a choice between honoring the past and embracing the future. She could carry Michael's memory forward while also opening her heart to new possibilities. The tattoo on her arm would always tell Michael's story, but her life was becoming a larger story about resilience, connection, and the ways that shared understanding of loss could become the foundation for unexpected love. As they left the shooting range that afternoon, James took Sarah's hand, the one attached to the arm that bore Michael's memorial. "Your brother would be proud of the woman you've become," he said quietly, "and I'm grateful that his story brought us together." Sarah smiled, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face and the steady presence of James beside her. "I think he would approve of you," she replied. "Michael always said I deserved someone who would understand the important things. You understand the most important things." Their story had begun with a stranger's attention to a memorial tattoo, but it had evolved into something much deeper, a love built on shared values, mutual respect, and the understanding that the best way to honor the fallen is to live fully and love deeply. Sarah's ordinary life had been transformed not by forgetting her grief, but by finding someone who helped her carry it in a way that honored both her past and her future.